Hello, my name is Robert Emmett Hernan. I'm head of Blue Stack Productions, the publisher of Irish Environment, an online magazine covering environmental matters on the island of Ireland. I'm very happy today to be here in Enniskillen in Northern Ireland with Aedin McLoughlin. Aedin, hello, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
So you're involved with an organization called Good Energy Alliance Ireland. I wonder if you could tell the audience what it is and what it does.
Okay. Well, Good Energy Alliance Ireland is an NGO and it's located in Leitrim, which is in the northwest of Ireland. And we started off really as a result of our involvement with the campaign against fracking, particularly in Leitrim, but also cross-border in Fermanagh. So we were founded in 2011, and since then we have become a company limited by guarantee, and we have worked very hard in the campaign against fracking. We also are involved with European programs that are encouraging young people to come to Ireland, and we're working to look at the resources that are needed to get young people to be more active in all matters about energy, including climate change.
And Aedin, how many members are there in the association?
It's a very small organisation. People think because of our social media presence and the amount of activity that we're very big, but we have about 24 members. They are spread throughout Ireland. But what's very strong, we have very strong links with other organisations, with obviously the organisations that are involved in the campaign against fracking in Ireland, in Britain, in the States, in Europe. But we also have links with other environmental organisations because we're members of the environmental pillar. And through that is an association of 29 organisations that are national organisations working in the area of the environment throughout Ireland. So because of all those links, we do an awful lot. We have a lot of influence. We can operate at all levels. We come from grassroots, so therefore we have very strong connections with the community, but also with the local authorities, with the local government and with national government.
Now, Aedin, I thought what we would do is start with the fracking issue and then come back to some of the other energy issues that you're currently involved with.
Okay.
And why don't you tell the audience that you were recently, last year, was it, on a tour in the U.S. on fracking, and tell how that came about.
Yes, that was an extraordinary privilege, I would say, that I was invited by the Heinrich Böll Foundation. They actually wanted to see what fracking was like actually on the ground in the States. We had 9 days, and during those 9 days we started in Washington. We spoke to people from the Sierra Club. We went to Pennsylvania, where we actually visited Dimock, which is a town that is very much in the news because of the awful things that have happened there because of fracking. Their drinking water is gone. We actually saw the methane bubbling up in the water. We smelled another sample that had been so polluted, and nobody could identify what the smell came from. So there was no question of treating that water. You have community, people in the community with rashes on their arms and their legs that have peculiar cancers, that really the people the community is destroyed, and that was very sad. It really was. And when I looked at the environment in Pennsylvania, it reminded me so much of the environment here. I mean, it is a beautiful place with rolling hills and lakes and rivers and small rural communities, and this is exactly what we have here. And the powerlessness of people to do anything about it. They all said the same thing, that once the industry comes in, you're powerless because it's like a steamroller. It just keeps going, and people then have to cope with the impacts. We went to Ithaca in New York State, where we met people from Cornell University, including my hero, Anthony and Graphia. Yeah. I actually had dinner with them.
You did?
I did. And Anthony is as charming as he appears in the media. He is terrific, a terrific guy. Yeah. and Bob Howarth was there as well, Professor Bob Howarth. Also, it was like the who's who of the anti-fracking campaign there. But what was very moving was that they had a strong representation at the meeting with the indigenous people. So we had the philosophy of the care of the land and how we don't own the land, that we have it in trust, and that respect for Mother Nature. That was coming out very strongly. I found that very moving, in fact, you know. So it was it was an extraordinary event as far as I was concerned.
And presumably kind of reinvigorates you in terms of the opposition.
Well, what happened was quite astonishing, because before I left, as I said to you, our organisation is a member of the Environmental Pillar in Ireland, and we have meetings with the EPA twice a year. So the EPA had been given the instruction to commission a 2-year study on fracking, which was actually a cross-border north and south study, and it had members from Northern Ireland as well as the Republic on the steering committee. Now, we learned a while before I left that the contract had been given to CDM Smith, and that this guy had links with the oil and gas industry. We didn't know as much as we know now, but what I did was that, because I was a member of the pillar, I was entitled to be on a delegation to the EPA. So I asked for a progress report and various other important, asked certain questions that were important to see what exactly was going on. And as it happens, the meeting with the EPA was 2 or 3 days after I came back from the States. So here was I, full of fervour and energy, even though I was also a bit jet lagged. But we arrived in the EPA. I had asked all these questions, and we were given so much information that we weren't actually expecting. We were told the tasks, who was doing the tasks, who was reviewing the tasks, who was going to write them, when were they going to be done, and a lot of other information that much more than we had expected. So we got together the people in the campaign against fracking that we knew would have the energy, would be supportive of a campaign to get this study stopped. Because what we discovered was that 2 companies were more or less responsible for the whole study. That we had CDM Smith, and we had a company that they brought in, AMEC, both of whom were past or present members of the Marcellus Shale Coalition, and that they were the coordinators of the whole project, and that any reports coming from the project would be basically written by them. Okay? So we wanted to publicise this. We wanted to get political involvement in the whole thing. It was an amazing campaign. We actually got the question debated on the at government level. We had the EPA up in front of the Joint Oireachtas Committee, which is a committee that deals with the environment and with energy, and it grilled the people from the EPA for 3 hours to get the facts about this study.
So, Aedin, now what is their present status of the license issued to Tambor Resources for Mana and Leitrim?
And Leitrim. I'm glad you said Fermanagh and Leitrim, because in fact even though Fermanagh and Leitrim have a border, so they are in 2 minutes you can go from one area to the other, but the legal status of licenses is completely different in the 2 jurisdictions. In Fermanagh, Tamboran asked for an exploration license that included permission to drill and to frack, and they got it. In the south, I think because we were not too sure of this, but probably because the legislation wasn't quite in place, They got permission for licensing options, which meant that they could spend 2 years doing desktop study and shallow drilling, and then make up their minds whether they wanted to apply for a full exploration license after that. So the 2-year period is well overdue for the licensing option. That actually expired in February 2013. And at the time we thought maybe it would be abolished altogether. But no, at that time the government then decided that they would carry out this 2-year study that the EPA is now doing. We delayed that study actually starting by a year and a half by creating the campaigning for public participation. We had over 1,000 submissions. They had to go through all of these submissions, and the whole thing was delayed until 2014, August 2014. So the government then said that there would be no decisions taken on exploration licenses or fracking until after that study was completed. That's the situation in the south.
Did they do some exploration in Fermanagh?
Yes, because they had the exploratory license that that gave them permission to drill. They then decided that what they would do, and it's very clever, that they would drill as close to the border as they could, because they said that because it's the same underground geological structure, that the results of the drill in the north would be applicable to the area in the south. And in fact, the Geological Survey North and South agreed with that. And the government in the south said that those results could be used in an application for drilling in Leitrim.
Was that ever subject to an independent analysis, whether the geography and the geology is in fact the same between the two areas?
It is really, because the universities have already done some work in this area. It's not as much as it should be because of the troubles, funnily enough, because it was very difficult in the last, since the 70s to put crews on the ground, as you can well imagine. So, so the geological surveys of the north and south are very interested in this part of the world, not only for fracking, but for other reasons as well. And we constantly get word that people want to do the studies, but so far the campaign against fracking is saying we don't want anybody to touch anything for any reason until we have a decision made as to what the situation is about fracking.
So now that takes us back to the study, and you were talking about the leading up to the study. And what's the current status of that study now? There's been recent development that's very important.
There has, because of the campaign that was waged by the campaign against fracking. We had a very intense campaign from September to January, and as a result of that, the minister, the junior minister for energy, announced in the Dáil, in the Irish government, that he wanted the study stopped. The reason for that was that the consortium that was carrying out the study proposed that there wouldn't be any interim reports at all until after a phase where people had come on the ground and had done on the ground studies about seismology and about groundwater. And people here in this area weren't very happy at all about the idea of people from these two organisations that were members of the Marcellus Shale Coalition coming and seeing how good their land would be for fracking. So it was pretty obvious that there would be intense opposition to the study continuing, and certainly that second phase continuing. So the minister said, no, we're going to stop the study now, and we're going to look for the reports of the work that has been done. The department, he had made the request on the grounds, in the Parliament, The department then wrote to the steering committee.
This is the Department of Energy?
Department of Energy. They wrote to the steering committee that was overseeing the study, and they asked them to stop as well, and they have done so. Now they're calling it a halt, or something that may not be permanent.
So the consortium, the steering committee went to EPA and then asked them to stop it. Was the Northern Ireland government, because they're participants financially and otherwise, were they consulted and agreed to the pausing?
From the point of view of the steering committee, certain members of the steering committee were from the north. There were representatives from the Geological Survey of Northern Ireland, from the Environmental Agency, and from the Department of the Environment in the north. That they are there. Obviously, if they did have a request to put a halt to the study now, they had to get agreement from the powers that be.
Now, Aedin, one of the interesting things about the Irish EPA press release announcing this pause and agreeing to it is that the study was always focused on the environmental and to some extent health, or limited health impacts. But for the first time that I saw in the EPA press release, they talked about this in the context of the Republic of Ireland's white paper on energy, and how this is has to be seen in light of the commitment to reduce oil and gas and eventually eliminate it. And that sounded like a new note coming from the EPA.
The EPA is very concerned about climate change. That's the first thing. They're genuinely concerned. They are funding a lot of research in the area, and the statements that they are making are pointing out all the time that climate change is something that has to be tackled seriously by the country, by everybody really, by globally in fact. Now, there is actually at the moment no current policy on energy in Ireland. Any decisions that are made on the basis of legislation that comes from the 1960s that wants to promote exploration and exploitation of hydrocarbons. This is completely out of date, but nevertheless we still have in the south the Petroleum Affairs Division, whose mandate is to encourage oil and gas exploration. We really have to tackle this. If we are going to tackle climate change in a real and realistic way, we must actually develop a new energy policy in the south. There has been a white paper produced that is the framework for policy, but doesn't actually state any policy. Right. And so far, even since the framework has been published, we do not see any action on the part of the government, unfortunately. And just now, we're looking towards the targets that have been set for 2020, and Ireland looks at the moment as if it's going to be 10% off the targets and could be more. We know what has to be done, but there isn't a commitment to actually getting that done. But why is it? We do not know why the government are not taking climate change seriously so far.
Maybe having to do with farming and the huge impact from methane, which is driving the greenhouse gas emissions. That is an enormous problem. And we do know that the Irish Farmers Association, they are a very, very strong lobby group with the government. A lot of TDs come from rural areas, and they are hand in glove with the farming associations. We are not against farming, of course. I mean, our rural environment is really, really important. But we do think that the farmers' associations need to take this on board. There are ways of tackling it. There are ways of farming that actually could contribute to reducing our carbon emissions, and that is not being done. DM study kind of on hold at the moment, waiting for the first phase report, which is at the end of this year.
Yes.
And the licenses are on hold. And you now have...
Now the southern license is on hold.
Right.
Which is interesting because the government said that no decision would be made until the study was completed.
Correct.
And examined.
Yes.
The study isn't going to be completed. So it is a very interesting question now, what is going to happen. The north is unfortunately a bit different, and we are actually far more concerned at the moment with what's happening in the north than what's happening in the south. We can see that there is, you know, we have confidence that nothing will be done quickly in the south. But in the north, Tamboran have had, their license in Fermanagh was terminated because they went beyond the time frame of their license. But they are now appealing that. And I would have no confidence that that appeal wouldn't be successful, to be honest. The Northern Executive is very much linked with the Executive in Westminster, and with the British governments being so pro-fracking and opening the doors and making the pathway easy for the fracking companies. I just wonder, you know, will the feelings of the community and the strength of the campaign there be strong enough to stop it coming in? It's a huge worry for us. The UK at the moment is holding Northern Ireland up. It gives an enormous subvention each year. And if it was seen by Westminster that fracking would generate the revenues to pay for Northern Ireland, then it would be very tempting for Westminster to say, let it happen up over there, you know, that this would be an easy way to get out of that problem of subvention.
And you are the Good Energy Alliance Ireland.
Yes.
What other issues are you addressing? You mentioned the energy efficiency. Are there any other wind farm issue? Is the association taking a position on wind farms?
Well, we have indeed, yes. The wind farm issue is quite complex, and the controversy about it came about because the obligation to reduce carbon emissions came from Europe, and we are the second windiest country in Europe. Scotland is first. So the government said, we'll put wind farms everywhere, and that'll solve the problem. There are developers there that are only too delighted to put in as many wind turbines as they can. And so some very unwise decisions were made. Huge wind farms with enormous turbines were put into communities without proper public consultation, without real benefits going to the local communities, and also far too close to houses that were really impacting on the landscape. So naturally enough, those communities have got together and they are now vociferously anti-wind. Now, it's not just as simple as that either, because we see signs that some of these organisations are very well funded. So there's a question mark about it. How actually objective are they? Is there money coming into them from oil and gas? We don't know. But definitely the anti-wind lobby is very strong. What we then looked at is the situation where we are coming from the community. Obviously, the community voice is a very important voice for us. We see renewable energies as being really a way of communities to benefit from technologies that are developing. And therefore we are saying we are not against wind energy under any circumstances. But what wind energy is established should be made in conjunction with communities, having joint projects and having real benefits for communities. Ireland has a huge potential, both north and south, to actually generate revenue as well. Because of our interconnectors that are being set up, there is no reason, if we have a huge if we have a big industry, a wind industry, we can sell energy, and that can be it can generate revenue for the country. But it has to be done in conjunction with the people that are affected by it.
Thanks for
Okay.
talking with us, Aedin.
You're welcome.